My mom miscounted the pills before she left for Chicago. I found out Friday evening when I popped open Saturday's slot and it was empty, and Sunday was empty, and I shook the whole organizer over the counter like an idiot hoping one would materialize, and nothing came out. Both my parents were in Chicago for the weekend. The backup bottle was on the storage shelf in the cellar, which meant the one place I needed to be was the one place my leg couldn't take me. I tore through every cabinet in the kitchen with my heart climbing because I already knew they were empty. Bathroom, hall closet, parents' nightstand. Every empty shelf made the throbbing worse, like my leg could sense I was running out of options. I called my mom. I ran out of meds. You miscounted. Oh no. Oh honey, I'm so sorry. I need the backup from the cellar. No. Her voice shifted to something faster and tighter. You can't make it down those stairs with your leg. You could fall. I need the medication, Mom. Take a hot bath and use the heating pad. We'll be home by 3 tomorrow and I'll bring them right up. It's not a headache. My leg is on fire. I know, honey. Just please don't try the stairs. Promise me you won't try the stairs. I told her I promised because that was easier than arguing. I didn't mean it. The heating pad helped for 20 minutes and then the throbbing came back worse, like it was punishing me for thinking it would work. I ran a bath and sat in it until the water went cold and the pain climbed from my knee up through my hip like something alive crawling through my bones. I dried off and limped to the kitchen and gripped the counter and stood there breathing through my teeth. By 9 p.m., I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets and both hands wrapped around my knee, squeezing like I could hold the bones together. The medication was 30 feet below me, behind a door my mother begged me not to open. I pulled myself up using the counter and limped down the hallway. The cellar door was at the end of the kitchen hallway. My mom always said the stairs were too steep for my leg and to stay out of there. I'd never argued because I had no reason to go down, until now. I pulled it open and stale air hit my face, smelling like concrete and dust and something underneath it that made my neck prickle. Steep wooden stairs dropping into black. I gripped the railing with my right hand and my phone flashlight with my left and took the first step. The wood groaned. My bad leg dragged behind me and the knee buckled on the third step, and I grabbed the railing with both hands and my phone slipped out of my grip and bounced off every step and landed at the bottom with the light pointing sideways into the dark. 3 steps down in total black with my bad leg shaking under me. One fall and the leg would snap in the same place it broke when I was 2. Every intelligent thought I had said, go back upstairs and wait for Mom. Instead, I gripped the railing and went down blind because the pain was louder than the fear. 1 step at a time, palms sweating on the wood, bad knee grinding with every drop. I reached the last step and my bad leg gave out and I dropped to the concrete and caught myself on my hands and knees. I grabbed the phone and swept the light across the cellar, concrete walls and an old furnace and metal shelving. I found the medication on the second shelf and the relief hit me so hard, my eyes burned. I dry swallowed 2 pills and leaned against the shelf with my eyes closed, waiting for the throbbing to ease. Then the light drifted left and caught color on the wall behind the far shelf where there shouldn't be color. I pushed myself up and limped closer and my breath stopped. Pencil drawings taped to the concrete, trees with full canopies and birds in flight and a pond with geese lined up along the bank. Not 1 or 2. I swept the light further and found dozens more, then hundreds. Rooftops and streets and a gas station I recognized from the corner of Maple and 5th. Someone had drawn our entire town on the walls of our cellar. My hands started shaking because my brain couldn't make sense of it. The tape was fresh. The pencil lines were sharp. Someone was drawing these now. Someone was down here. One drawing stopped me cold. 2 figures standing in a yard, a tall one and a small one with a crooked left leg. Underneath, in careful letters, it said, "Me and Eli." I traced my finger across the small figure's crooked leg. Whoever drew this knew about my leg and knew what I looked like and knew my name. The hair on my arms stood up and every muscle in my body told me to run, but my bad leg couldn't run, so I stood there in the dark with my heart slamming against my ribs. The light swept to the far wall and hit a door. A deadbolt on the outside slid shut. The deadbolt was on the outside, which meant whatever was behind this door was locked in, not locked out. A sound came from behind it, not the furnace. Human breathing, slow and steady, and right on the other side of the wood. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat, and the phone shook in my hand, and the beam jumped across the concrete. I should have gone upstairs and called the police. That's what a smart person would have done. I walked toward the door because I had to know. Cold metal under my fingers. I slid the bolt bolt, and the scrape echoed off every wall. The breathing stopped. I pushed the door open, a twin bed against the wall, and a desk covered in books, and a lamp with a yellow shade. And sitting on the bed was a person, thin and pale, with dark hair past his ears. He looked up, and his eyes opened wide, and then softened, and then filled with tears. Eli. He knew my name. I had never seen this face in my life. He looked maybe 21 with sharp cheekbones and thin wrists. His eyes dropped to my left leg, and the way I was standing with every ounce of weight shifted right. His whole face crumbled. Your leg. His voice cracked. I did that to you. I stumbled backward until my shoulders hit concrete. Who are you? He told me his name was Caleb. He told me he was my brother. The word hit me like a physical thing, and I grabbed the doorframe because the floor tilted under my feet. Brother. He pushed me down the stairs when I was 2 and broke my leg. Our parents told everyone he died and put him in this cellar 11 years ago. My vision blurred and I realized I'd stopped breathing. He spoke without looking at me, with his eyes on the floor and his voice flat, like he'd rehearsed this speech 1,000 times in case this moment ever came. I sat on the bottom step and stared at him. A brother. I had a brother who was alive and living under my bedroom. The thud I sometimes heard at night wasn't the furnace, it was him. But he told me he pushed me, and my parents told me he pushed me, and he didn't remember doing it. A 7-year-old who couldn't remember the worst thing he ever did. Something about that didn't sit right in my chest. I went upstairs and sat at the kitchen table and pressed my hands flat on the wood to keep them from shaking. I kept thinking I was going to throw up. A brother. I had a brother living under this floor. I didn't sleep that night. My parents came home the next afternoon. My mother hung up her coat. My father dropped his keys on the counter. He opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water and drank half of it standing there. Normal, like there wasn't a person in the cellar 10 feet below his shoes. I looked at them both under the kitchen light and my stomach turned over. 2 people who had lied to me for my entire life. I ate dinner across from my father. My fork scraped the plate because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time he picked up his fork, I stared at his hands and thought about what kind of person buries their own son alive. The next morning at breakfast, I poured cereal and said, I've been having dreams about falling downstairs when I was little. My mother's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. What kind of dreams? Like someone pushing me and then falling. And my leg. I looked up. Is that how I hurt my leg? My mother put the spoon down with a shaking hand and looked at my father. He stood at the counter with his coffee and his expression stayed completely flat. You had an accident when you were 2, my mother said in a careful, rehearsed voice. Your brother Caleb had these episodes where he would get violent and he couldn't control it. He pushed you down the stairs and your leg broke badly and it never healed right. And then what happened to Caleb? She looked at my father again. He watched me over the rim of his mug. He died, sweetheart, a few months after. He got sick. Her eyes darted and she picked up her spoon and put it down and picked it up again. She was lying and she knew I could tell, and the anger rose in my throat so fast I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from screaming across the kitchen that their dead son was breathing 10 feet below us. My father set his mug down. Where are these dreams coming from, Eli? I don't know. They just started. He repeated it back without blinking. He crossed the kitchen and stood behind my mother's chair. The mind does funny things. I wouldn't read into it. He put his hand on her shoulder and she flinched. After breakfast, he went to the cellar door and stood in front of it for a long time. That afternoon, I heard drilling. He installed a padlock on the cellar door and tested it 3 times. Then he looked at me across the kitchen. My skin crawled because the expression on his face said he already knew. I found the key to the new padlock in the junk drawer that night. Same brass key ring my dad kept all his spare keys on. I snuck down every night looking for the truth. The stairs got easier once I learned which ones creaked and where to put my weight so my leg held. The story my parents told me had a hole in it, and I needed to find it. The first night, I asked Caleb to walk me through what happened at the top of the stairs. I remember standing there and hearing you crying. I remember Dad was up there with you. Then a crash. I ran down, and you were at the bottom, and your leg was wrong, and Dad was standing at the top looking down at us. He pressed his palms flat on the desk. I don't remember pushing you. I was 7. I just know I did because Dad told me every day for a week. You did this. You hurt your brother. You broke his leg. I believed him. I brought him a radio the next visit. Music filled the cellar, and he pressed his hand flat against the speaker and closed his eyes. His whole body leaned toward the sound, like a plant turning toward light. I brought gummy bears, and he held a green one up to the lamp and studied it like it was a diamond. They changed the flavor, like 8 years ago. That's devastating. I asked him about the drawing on the wall, the 2 figures, me and Eli. He looked at the floor. I drew that the first year. I didn't know what your face looked like, so I guessed. But I knew about the leg because I could hear you limping through the ceiling. I brought a chess set, and he destroyed me in 4 moves, and then 6, and then 5, and I didn't even care because watching him concentrate on something that wasn't a concrete wall made my chest ache. You're getting worse. worse. I'm getting angry. He grinned, and for a few hours, he wasn't a prisoner. He was just my older brother beating me at chess and eating gummy bears and drawing buildings from descriptions I gave him. Every visit I liked him more, and every visit the story made less sense. A violent kid who couldn't remember being violent. A boy who drew geese and studied green gummy bears under a lamp. None of it added up to the monster they described. One night I opened the back door and walked him into the yard. His bare feet hit grass for the first time in 11 years. He dropped to his knees and pressed his palms into the dirt and breathed in so deep his whole body shook. My throat ached watching him. He tipped his head back and looked at the stars and his mouth fell open. He pointed at one. Is that one the same? The bright one? That's been there the whole time. I used to see it through the vent. He stood there pointing at a star he'd only ever seen through a crack in the foundation. We went back inside before sunrise. The next afternoon, a police car sat in front of Mrs. Calloway's house 3 doors down. I stood on the porch gripping the railing. An ambulance pulled up. They brought her out on a stretcher with her neck in a brace and her face bruised. My father came out and stood next to me. What happened? She fell down the stairs. The words hit me so hard I grabbed the railing with both hands. Fell down the stairs. The same words they used about me. I looked at my father, and he watched the ambulance with no expression at all, and his hands steady in his pockets. I went to the cellar. Caleb, last night when you were outside, did you go anywhere? What? Did you leave the yard? No, I was in the grass the whole time. You saw me. Mrs. Calloway was pushed down her stairs last night. The color drained from his face. You think I did that? Did you? He stood up and his whole body went rigid. I didn't leave the yard. Because if you went over there and you hurt someone, I touched a tree, Eli. I sat in the grass and looked at the sky. My hands gripped my knees so hard my knuckles ached. The guilt of accusing him burned in my stomach because I needed it to not be him. Pushed down the stairs, the same way it happened to me. He stood with his shoulders locked tight. The tremor started in his fingers and climbed his arms. He grabbed my arm and his grip was crushing. I stumbled and my bad leg folded and my knee cracked against the concrete. The old brake throbbed like it remembered, and for one terrifying second I understood why my parents locked him down here. Caleb, let go. His eyes focused and the grip loosened and he looked at his hand on my arm and the color drained from his face. He threw himself into the corner, shaking. Go, now. Through the ceiling later, I heard the desk crash over and the lamp shatter. Then silence. I'm sorry. His voice came through the floorboards, muffled and small. That's why I'm here. Because of your leg. I pressed my palm flat against the floor above him. I'm coming back tomorrow. Silence. Bring gummy bears. The green ones? Especially the green ones. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Mrs. Calloway on the stretcher with her neck in a brace, pushed down her own stairs. I rolled over and looked out my window, and my blood ran cold. My father's truck sat on the street, not in the driveway where he always left it, on the street, closer to Mrs. Calloway's house. I went downstairs, and his jacket hung by the door. I checked the pockets with trembling fingers. A house key that didn't belong to our house. I turned it over under the hallway light, brass with a blue rubber grip. Mrs. Calloway's front door was blue. My knees went weak because I knew what this meant before my brain could say it. I checked his right sleeve and found a scratch on his forearm running from his wrist to his elbow. His sleeve had been hiding it all day. I put everything back and hung the jacket exactly the way I found it. I checked the inside pocket and found a folded note in handwriting I didn't recognize. If you don't tell them about the cellar, I will. I can hear him through the walls at night. I've heard him crying for years. This has to stop. Mrs. Calloway heard Caleb through her walls for 11 years, and she finally told my father she was going to report it, and he pushed her down the stairs to keep her quiet. Not Caleb. Dad. He pushed Mrs. Calloway the same way someone pushed me. The pattern was always him. I shoved the note in my own pocket. My hands were steady now. The fear had burned off and left something harder underneath. My father installed a second padlock on the cellar door and bolted a camera above it and ran the feed to his phone. That night, I took a flathead screwdriver from the toolbox in the garage and pried the hinge plate off the new padlock. The screws popped out one by one, and I caught each one in my palm so they wouldn't hit the floor. I left the padlock hanging on the deadbolt so it looked locked, but the whole plate swung free. I covered the camera lens with electrical tape, and he was in my room in 30 seconds. He grabbed my collar and shoved me against the wall. Stay away from that door. What's down there that you're so scared of? His grip tightened with his face 6 inches from mine. Drop it. Something moved behind his eyes that chilled me more than the shove. Not anger, calculation. He let go of my collar and walked out. I heard him on the phone that night pacing the kitchen with his voice low. She's still in the hospital. She can't talk to anyone yet, but she will. And the boy is in the cellar every night. I can hear the locks. A long pause. I need to handle this before he tells someone. Another pause. Tonight. I pressed myself against the hallway wall and held my breath. Tonight. Whatever he planned for the person under that floor was happening tonight. Terror and rage fought in my chest. I went to my room and lay down with my clothes on and my shoes by the bed. The smoke woke me up, thick and chemical and filling my bedroom from under the door. I rolled off my bed and hit the floor coughing. The air near the carpet stayed breathable. My shoes were right where I left them, and I shoved my feet in without tying them. I crawled to my bedroom door and pressed my hand against it, and the wood stung hot against my palm. I pulled my shirt over my mouth and opened it. The hallway was a tunnel of gray with orange light flickering from downstairs. The heat hit my face like opening an oven. Our house was on fire. Caleb was under a burning house. Everything else stopped mattering. I dropped to my hands and crawled toward the stairs. The banister was hot under my palm, and the carpet was melting. My bad leg dragged behind me on every step. The living room burned with the ceiling black and the wallpaper bubbling off the walls. I crawled through the kitchen by touch with the heat pressing down on me like a hand. The cellar door burned hot enough to blister skin. The padlocks warped in the heat and glowed at the edges. I grabbed the screwdriver off the counter where I'd left it and drove it behind the hinge plate. Hot metal seared my palm, and I smelled my own skin burning, but I kept prying until the plate popped free. The door swung open, and smoke rushed down the cellar stairs like water. I went down backward on my hands, gripping each step. My bad leg slipped on the fourth step, and I slid the rest of the way on my back and hit the concrete floor hard enough to knock the air out of my lungs. The cellar filled with smoke from above. The drawings on the walls curled in the heat. The geese went first with the paper browning and the edges lifting off the tape, then the rooftops, then the gas station on Maple and 5th that someone drew from memory. The drawing of the two figures was still there. Me and Eli, the tall one and the small one with the crooked leg. The edges browned and my chest cracked open because this was the only proof that my brother knew I existed. I reached for it, but the heat shoved me back. It caught fire and curled into nothing, and I watched 11 years of his love turn to ash. Caleb lay in the corner, curled up with his arms over his head. Caleb, nothing. I grabbed his arm and pulled. We have to go. Let it burn. The words punched me in the chest. Caleb, I deserve this. For what I did to you. You didn't do it. You were at the top of the stairs and Dad was with me. You don't remember pushing me because you didn't. Mrs. Calloway knew about this cellar. She heard you through the walls and she told Dad she was going to report it. He pushed her down the stairs to keep her quiet. The same thing he did to me. His eyes opened red and confused. A beam cracked above us and the ceiling split. Caleb shoved me sideways. The beam crashed into the floor between us. Sparks and plaster exploded across the concrete. He was on his feet with his hand locked around my wrist, pulling me toward the stairs. Same iron grip as the episode, but this time pulling me toward safety. He knew this cellar by feel. He went up first, hauling me behind him. The kitchen roared like an oven with the air shimmering and the cabinets catching fire one by one along the wall. My left leg gave out on the tile, and I went down, and my knee cracked against the floor, and pain whited out my vision. I can't. My leg. He didn't hesitate. He hooked his arms under mine and lifted me off the floor and threw me over his shoulder. He carried me through the burning kitchen where the ceiling rained sparks, through the living room where the couch blazed as a solid block of fire. My bad leg hung over his shoulder and bounced against his back with every step. He kicked the front door open and carried me down the porch steps and dropped me onto the lawn. Cold grass against my back, orange sky above me, sparks drifting upward. My father stood on the sidewalk watching the house burn. He set the fire and walked out the front door and stood there while both of his sons burned inside. My mother's car came down the street and she slammed the brakes and was out before it stopped rolling. She saw the fire and my father on the sidewalk and me and Caleb on the lawn covered in soot. What did you do? The wiring. There is a gasoline can in the garage and my son was in that house. She walked toward him and he stepped back and she kept coming. You set this fire. Caleb was going to tell everyone. Tell them what? His mouth opened and closed. He looked at the burning house. He looked at me on the grass with my bad leg bent underneath me. The leg he broke. I threw him. The ground dropped out from under me. My mother stopped walking. The fire crackled behind us. Eli was too. He was crying and I lost my temper and I picked him up and I threw him down the stairs. My chest caved in. I sat on the grass 10 feet away and felt every word in my bones. He picked me up. He threw me. I was 2 years old. His leg broke on the landing. Caleb was standing at the top of the stairs. He was 7. He saw the whole thing. My father's voice steadied. Calm. The same calm he carried when Mrs. Calloway's ambulance pulled away. I told Caleb he did it. I told him every day. I sat him down and I said, you pushed your brother. You broke his leg. This is your fault. Every single day until a 7-year-old believed he was a monster. My mother pressed her hand over her mouth. And then you put him in the cellar. He saw what I did. He was the only witness. I couldn't let him tell anyone. For 11 years, I fed him. I brought him books. I kept him alive. You kept him in a hole. My mother's hand cracked across his face face so hard the sound echoed off the houses across the street. Caleb dropped to his knees in the grass and stared at his own hands. I didn't do it. He turned his palms over, and I had to look away because the expression on his face was too much. 11 years of believing he was a monster, and it was a lie. These hands never hurt anyone. Sirens cut through the night, and red and blue lights swept across the lawn. My mother was already talking to the officer and pointing at my father and pointing at the cellar. The officer walked toward my father and turned him around and put his wrists together. The handcuffs clicked around the same hands that threw me down a staircase when I was 2. The cruiser pulled away, and something I'd been holding in my chest for days finally let go. Caleb pressed his palms flat into the grass and breathed in through his nose, and his chest expanded like it was the first full breath he'd taken in 11 years.